Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fourth webinar toward the launching of the Mediterranean Forest Research Agenda that will take place in Barcelona next week. My name is Magda Budager-Karat, and I'm the principal scientist at EFIMED. I'll begin sharing my screen. So EFIMED, for the people who don't know who we are, is part of the European Forest Institute. EFIMED is based in Barcelona, but the headquarters of EFI is in Joensuu in Finland. We have offices in Bonn, Brussels, Rome. And our Mediterranean office, as its name, works on the Mediterranean region. EFIMED prepared 10 years ago, a little bit more, the agenda for the Forest Research Agenda 2010-2020. And now we prepared already the next one for the next 10 years, and it will be launched next week. This agenda was prepared after trying to identify the burning themes around the Mediterranean, and 4 of them were identified. One about managing forest for multiple ecosystem services. Resilience of forest was also a hot topic. One of the topics dealt with biodiversity and forest genetic resources. And the 4th one is about social and business innovation. So we had already, for the last 3 weeks, 3 of those webinars. You can access to them through a link that you will share later on. So you can have the recording, but also the material we worked on. And today we have the 4th one, which will be presented by our colleague from Padova University, Laura Secco. Okay, before moving forward, I will just present EFIMED team, who is working in the preparation of the agenda, but also the logistic for the webinars and the forum next week. And we are supported by SylvaMed, the task force on the Mediterranean forest. We have with us today Rhea, Leila, Federica, Hiba, and Sanjay. And Simon was supposed to be with us, but his computer broke just a few minutes before the meeting. So today, Edward Maury, who is expert at EFIMED, will be facilitating this session, this webinar. And well, welcome, Laura. And Edward, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Magda. So we are very happy to have today with us Dr. Laura Secco. Laura Secco is Associate Professor at the University of Padova, Italy, at the Department of Land, Environment, Agriculture and Forestry. She has a master's degree in forest science and a PhD in land use and economics. Before entering the academic career as a researcher, in 2005, Laura Secco worked as consultant in the field of environmental and forest certification, forest planning and local development, and was appointed as national contact person of the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC. And in 2001, she co-founded and became the national secretary of FSC Italy Group. In her 17 years long career, she participated in several international, national and local projects. In 2012, she became Vice Director of the Unit Cross-Sectoral Policy Impacts on Forest and Environment at the UFRO Division number 9, Forest Policy and Economics. In 2011, she co-founded the spin-off of the University of Padova, ETI4, where she provides guidance and scientific support. She teaches at the master degree Erasmus Mundus the courses on sustainable tropical forestry, Mediterranean forestry and natural resources management, and sustainable forestry and nature management, as well as several courses in the master degree in forest science at the University of Padua. Today, Dr. Secco is going to enlighten us about the 4th theme of the Mediterranean Forest Research Agenda, the social and business innovations and policy instruments supporting the Mediterranean forest bioeconomy. So Dr. Secco, the floor is yours. You have 25 minutes that will be followed by a period of questions from the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Edward, for the brilliant and very detailed presentation. I didn't remind I did all these things in that long career. I am already quite old. I think I can share the screen, right? Great. You can see and you can hear me, right?
Yes.
That's fine. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for those who are joining this webinar. Thanks to EFI, Magda, Edward, and all the staff for inviting me and for giving us the opportunity to share the results of this study that we carried out in the last 2 years, exploring this topic of innovation. Today, I will try to focus on what we did and what are the main results, leaving then room for the discussion later on today or next week also. So I will try to show what we found and what we think is more relevant with respect to the number 4 theme that is under discussion today. I want to give you some introductory thoughts about the situation in the Mediterranean Basin. I know that my colleagues in the previous 3 teams did that from the ecological point of view and from the technical point of view. I would like rather to focus on the social aspects and the economic aspects that are what we have to deal with in this study and in this part of the discussion. I want to remind you that the Mediterranean Basin forests are, of course, somehow important for many different types of uses, and there are divergent interests connected to different group of stakeholders and also new emerging social demands that are also recently driven by emerging challenges and crises that are financial crisis, energetic crisis, but also biodiversity loss crisis or climate crisis. So we are facing trends that are somehow particularly strong and determining uncertain conditions for us to decide what are the key topics to research and to invest time also for the businesses, for example. And this is connected to a lot of characteristics that we can see in the Mediterranean area in terms not only of the characteristic of the forests that have been already presented by my colleagues, by sure, but mainly looking at what are the characteristics of the forest sectors, what are the fact that in many Mediterranean countries, for example, the forestry companies, those who are really working in harvesting and in the first processing processes are small-scale companies. We are not having many of that large scale and high investment companies like in the north part of Europe, for example, or other part of the world. And then we are looking at and let's see, understanding that there are new ways of looking at the forest by the forest owners, by the forest and land managers, because the type of landowners are changing. There are new attitudes and new values because many forest owners now are living in urbanized areas, for example, not necessarily remaining in rural areas. And we have been observing a lot of, let's say, land abandonment also because of the urbanization processes that we faced in the last decades. And this is bringing with them a lot of consequences in terms of rewilding, for example, of the rural areas, with the fact that there are new threats, new challenges also with bears, with wolves, with ticks and health consequences to that. And everything is connected also to the fact that we have most of the Mediterranean countries have still a very high land ownership fragmentation that does not allow to work in a very profitable way from the economic point of view, for example. And we are observing nowadays also an increase between two different extreme positions with respect to the forest use, conservation versus production. And an increasing need for cultural ecosystem services that are really getting paramount importance also as a consequence of the pandemic that everyone experienced. And because of this characteristic, we know that the forest industries, especially for the production of timber for industrial applications in these areas, is complex, is costly, and it can't really be competitive with other regions, for example. And the profitability is quite limited. And for this reason, forest industries often are depending on imports. And there is also the new data published by the FAO 1 week ago about the future expectations in terms of consumption of energy, of wood-based biomasses for energy production, for example, show that there will be a growing demand for energy coming from wood. And this is somehow has to be compared with respect to the capacity to supply these biomasses. And it seems that there is a big gap in terms of balance between supply and demand. So probably we will face an increased problem also for biomasses, not only for industrial timber. We had on top of this the fact that we know that Mediterranean forests are providing a lot of no-market ecosystem services that are not enough taken into consideration in the national accountability, for example. And also when there are some attention on that, wild non-wood forest products that are some of the marketable ecosystem service that are more important for these Mediterranean areas are in any case undervalued, underestimated, and we know not enough in terms of statistics on these type of products and how they are consumed in our region. And this brings to the main and most important problem that forest in many Mediterranean countries does not significantly contribute to the national economy. So they contribute for very low percentage to the GDP, for example, at national level. And this means that they have a low political relevance because they cannot be considered, they are not considered by the politicians as resources strategic because their total value is not fully recognized. And starting from this framework, let's say, we tried to understand in these years which are the dominant discourses for forest-based bioeconomy, and we found out that these dominant discourses are mainly technology-oriented and industry-driven, in the sense that there is quite a lot of attention and investments done on biorefineries, biotechnologies, bioenergy products, high-performance materials, new type of materials that are highly engineered material and that need technology-oriented innovation. And the main drivers of this attention and this allocation of funds and investment are the decision where to allocate the funds. So the European technology platforms and the European research area, they are investing in this direction rather than in social innovation or organizational or institutional innovations that we are interested in also. And we have to keep in mind what we mean by technological innovation. They say that using the dominant or the common understanding of this term, by technological innovations, we include all those innovations that are industry and business oriented, that are important for the production of new type of products, new processes, mainly connected to new technological devices and digitalization also. That can bring some benefit to the enterprises, mainly for business applications, let's say. But then we have also observed that there are other emerging discourses for bioeconomy that can show us new possible future directions. And these are those connected to the need to broaden the range of their importance assigned to the different ecosystem services, not only timber for industrial applications, applications, not only biomasses, but also the cultural ecosystem services, or those that are less, that have less priorities in the investment agendas. Then there are emerging discourses on the importance of involving citizens in taking the decisions and in looking for new solutions, for visioning the future, and also to co-create knowledge that is not should not only be private-owned knowledge, but should be collectively shared knowledge. And these are these trends are driven by new policies that have been launched by the European Union, more focusing on social capital concepts, on social innovation. That was one of the most relevant new concepts emerging in this area in the last few years, but also looking at the transformative social innovation, that is social innovation intended to introduce really transformative changes in the entire system. And this is supported by a lot of activity to broad and to circulate these emerging concepts with the intention to invest more in this direction, also from the point of view of the European Commission and of the funding programs in future. This is what they would like to do. And we have to keep in mind that when we talk about social innovation, thinking about the definition, we used the similar definition because it was designed for rural areas and for natural resources, especially natural resources. We talk about something, we talk about processes that are changing the relations among stakeholders, are changing their values, are changing their attitudes, are changing the governance arrangements. And these reconfiguration of the social practices are supposed to bring some outcomes in terms of societal well-being, and are necessarily based on the engagement of civil society actors that are supposed to be a key component of these actions and of the interaction to find new solutions to the emerging challenges. And you might know that this project is ended a couple of years ago, but the material is still available online in the website, and we did quite a lot of efforts to disseminate and to provide also practical ideas on what we mean by social innovation in our field of interest and for the Mediterranean areas, because CIMRA was also focusing on this part of the world. Moving to the objective of our study, then the paper that we have finalized is ready to be submitted soon, and the main objectives were to try to understand what were the current gaps, knowledge gaps in terms of research on innovation, and also we were trying to understand whether there was a gap with respect to the research and innovation agendas set until 2020 with respect to what we did as researchers in this field and in this region. And also we wanted to formulate on the basis of these breakthroughs and knowledge gaps identification what might be the recommendations for three main targets: practitioners, policymakers, and researchers. And we the methodology is quite similar to the one that was applied by the other colleagues in the other three teams. We focus on the Mediterranean signatory countries of the Barcelona Convention, and we had other 6 countries that were mentioned because they are part of the Mediterranean bioclimatic basin. Then we carried out a literature review searching for scientific papers published in Scopus from 1980 to 2020, searching for different combination of keywords and searching for not only for Mediterranean keyword, but also for each single country of the analyzed area. And we were looking for these keywords in title, abstract, and keywords list by the authors in English English papers written. We carried out on the basis of that a qualitative content analysis using the traditional narrative review, but we add something based on network analysis, thus applying the so-called research weighting approach that is somehow try to provide easy to be understood visualizations of the scientific results. Then we add simple descriptive statistics. From the initial list of more than 200 papers initially found in this search, then we applied some exclusion and inclusion criteria. For example, we excluded all those papers that were mentioning innovation only as a general recommendation. Many papers were just inviting the policymakers or the researchers to support innovation, or they mentioned that innovation is a relevant issue to follow, but they didn't explain how, and they didn't provide ideas on practical paths to follow in these directions. So that papers have been excluded, and with that we found we extracted 86 papers that were included in our review, and we organized results according to innovation types and innovation topics, and we compared that with the research agendas that we were analyzing also. In fact, we were analyzing the contents of two main research and innovation agendas, the MFRA, the previous version, let's say the last set of directions. We complement this with the priority areas of the DG Agri Research and Innovation Agenda for 2080-2020, try to find how to integrate the two and to see how they were interconnected, and then comparing what the papers published were able to cover about these two set of priorities. But we also discovered while carrying out the study that we really needed a framework to guide the classification of innovations, because we realized that there were not a clear understanding or clear, I would use this term, but it's not nice, I know, is taxonomy of what innovations are. And we try to classify the type of innovations, dividing technological innovation from organizational and marketing innovation, institutional innovation, and social innovations, considering them as main different types of categories of innovations. But then we realized that each of these types can be divided in terms of scopes. So a technological innovation can have a product in terms of scope, or can have a process in terms of scope. And this is valid for all the other types. And then when we look at the level of innovation, we can have something that is disruptive innovation in a product, in the technological type of innovation, or we can have an incremental innovation, a complementary innovation. All these different dimensions of innovation should be better classified and put in order to allow people also to understand what the research is about and what might be the actions to be taken to support this type of innovation. So we developed this framework while doing the study, and now we already found that it has to be adjusted because of many reasons, but this will be more clearly explained in the paper. Then,
Laura,
yes,
it's
10 minutes.
Speaking. Yeah, 8 in fact.
Okay, thank you.
But maybe you can take a little bit more.
Okay, so, but I will try to be fast in this part, because in terms of results and discussion, we were trying to divide the results in terms of type of innovation, aggregating the topics, and we found out that, for example, in the case of the technical and technological innovations, the most recurrent topics were more focusing on harvesting techniques, new machineries, and on new research approaches, methods, and and tool to explore or to forecast future scenarios, for example. In terms of institutional organizational innovations, the most important topic are connected to the networks between or amongst actors, and then in terms of social innovation, social capital was one of the most studied concepts, together with the social innovation concept in itself. Then in terms of topics, we found out that looking at the forest industry and then wild and non-wood forest products, we found that cork industry and cork-based new products and applications are one of the most explored topic in Mediterranean publications, and then cork is also dominant non-wild forest products, non-wood forest products in the area, and then that we are observing increasing attention towards the cultural ecosystem services, tourism and recreation, and health and well-being. But then looking at how the papers are distributed, of course, there was a peak in the last year in terms of number of published papers, but we have to observe an unbalanced distribution. Italy, France, and Spain are the most represented countries, while we couldn't find any papers published by Algeria and Tunisia, for example, colleagues that are quite relevant, and we were a bit surprised of that. Then this unbalanced distribution confirms somehow what was found by other authors working on distribution of the research in this area. The fact that there are some dominant countries and areas is also connected to the fact that most of the papers derive from public funded research, particularly the European funding programs, Horizon 2020 or Aeronet. And this is somehow supporting the dynamic that the leader top countries are maintaining the leadership, and the level of competition in international calls for getting European funded projects is also increasing. So it is quite obvious that those countries that had good performances in getting EU funds projects in the past years remain at the top level on that. But this creates some unbalanced distribution of the funds that we might act to change a bit in future. Then what we observed is also that systematic and long-term research focusing on one topic and remaining on that topic more than 3-5 years, that is the normal length of these projects funds, is not performed, is only rarely performed, because we are following the calls, and that means that we as researchers, we are changing the topic quite frequently, and that is not, we are not really able to consolidate the results or to maintain a long-term perspectives on that. And then we have to think about the future, what might be the effects of the recovery and resilience funds that have been allocated in many countries, how we can intercept private funds, and how we can guarantee stable funds for strategic topics, and what might be the innovative funding mechanisms that policymakers can take into consideration. But that is something that I would touch again later on. Then another thing that it was confirmed with respect to previous research is a very high fragmentation, unfortunately. We were looking at the high fragmentation of the topics, using this as an example. So the focus on social capital, we wanted to see how much the researchers were also able to connect the keywords and the sub-dimensions of this very broad concept to understand how much their results can be integrated each other and can be used together. And we saw that while there is quite a lot of aggregative networks in terms of a concept like social network analysis, so the tools, or the fact that social capital is relevant and social innovation are relevant concepts with the ecosystem services, then for other concepts like the rural development, the role of forestry for rural development, the common agricultural policy, and the role of social capital in supporting the vibrant communities is not enough explored, or it is explored, but it is very highly fragmented and looked at in a very different perspectives. And this confirms what it was already found by other previously published research, that organizational innovations also within research institutions are needed to reinforce collaboration and to be able to work in a more network-oriented way, and reinforcing our capacity to collaborate and to build on the others' work, and not inventing our own paths and piece of work. We found out a list of topics that remain largely overlooked with respect to the potential and expressive needs. I don't want to mention or enter into the details of each, they will remain here, but let's say that there are many key aspects, like, for example, institutional innovations that are absolutely under considered in the research, and that we should probably focus more in future. And then we also need more research on impacts, real ground impacts of the policy and governance reforms that are not enough explored apart on a few topics. Of course, the role of citizens is something that has been invited to be explored, but it is not enough explored. There are only few papers dealing with that, and many other things. We were starting to summarize the recommendations. So the first recommendation is about shifting our mental approach from something very fragmented and analytical oriented to something that can really generate impacts and that can really help transformative changes. So try to shift our idea to work as a silos research focused group of work or activities into something that is more related to a broader approach, a system thinking approach, where the transdisciplinary is really put in practice. And also we suggest to improve, increase our capacity and decision to apply mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative approaches, and triangulate the results, because we need the quantitative indicators to provide overview and to have understanding of large areas or complex concepts. But we also need to qualitative deepen the concepts and enter into the details, and then we need to triangulate what we can observe on the basis of the quantitative aspects with the qualitative aspects. We need to improve our capacity and skills also to communicate. We investing in dissemination and also in try to find tools to improve the cross-country and cross-institutions collaborations. We have already a lot of networks and intention to collaborate, but then in practice it might be hard to put that into actions. And I think that this should be one of the priority for our activities. If you can go on to the next slide. Yes, and then the last general recommendation is about trying to select topics that are driven by the needs rather than by being driven by personal interests or professional passions, let's say. I know that we need to balance that, but it's absolutely important that we keep in mind what is relevant for the society. Then moving to the recommendations to the policymakers, we had many of these. We suggest the policymakers try to enlarge the concept they have of bioeconomy that is still too much only technological oriented, and it does not provide enough room for other type of innovations. Then trying to focus on the small and micro scale enterprises that are not monitored, they are not visible in the monitoring systems and in the accounting systems, but they are the vast majority in many Mediterranean countries. Then try to think how to include new types of beneficiaries of the European funding programs, because there are not only professionally farmers and professionally foresters who are working with the forest in this period. We expect that more and more there will be other type of hybrid organization or organizations that do not have a professional background on that, but they will deal with managing businesses activities in forest, at least in the Mediterranean concepts, also because of the shift of the attention towards more environmental, highly oriented policies and discourses. Then increase the stability of the funds and try to find a way to balance funds distribution among countries and among regions, not reducing these gaps that we have observed looking at the papers published. Supporting with financial mechanism or also technical assistance or just other type of, for example, information sharing, the co-creation processes that can reinforce the networking capacities and the social capital building, and also investing in the public forest administrations and try to create or reinforce collaborative higher education programs, for example, trying to apply virtual exchange programs that are some kind of new tools that we can now manage better than in the past after our experience with the lockdown during the pandemic, and then try to in general support not only technological oriented innovations that require large investments, but also frugal innovations are important for the Mediterranean context, and also try to give more value to the activities that the researchers are doing in technology transfer, not only in publishing papers that are increasing the gap between the researchers and the policy makers. All these looking at the future, because we know that we will observe a lot of challenges in the future. We know that there are a lot of new European Union strategies on different topics connected to environment, climate change, biodiversity, energy crisis that we are facing. And they are acting already with a lot of funding programs and supporting activities that are, most of them are giving a new role to the forest, at least on the paper and at least on the written strategies. Then we have to face this with what is emerging, also the global pandemic, the fact that we are more and more aware of the fact that the forest, our forests are under high crisis in terms of vulnerability and in terms of social challenges, because we know what are the dynamics, increasing forest fires, attack of bark beetles everywhere in Europe, the distribution of the problems of a lot of disease, increased droughts, less capacity of the forest to be resilient, and of course this is finally entering into the emerging discourses. This idea of the One Health approach is becoming very relevant, because we talk about health of soil, we talk about health of forest, and then we can talk about human health and well-being and how these are interconnected, and all the topics connected to the use of non-wood forest products is also connected to the nutritional values of these products, and thus the health, human health also in this aspect. And of course, the economic crisis is also bringing a lot of new questions to our attention, because we don't know how it will be in the future years, the role of biomasses and how much the demands for this type of product will affect the policies and will affect our capacity to provide science-based solutions and options. But in general, as a final remark, I would like to state that we are really in an urgent now to act to apply both research approaches and policy instruments that can help us to shift from the current situation that is still not enough oriented and forced towards the real sustainability transformations. If you can go on with that, we are now still in that part of this graph that visualize the, let's say, activity of the focus on the green and the conventional practices, the business as usual, and the dominant idea of sustainability. We try now to shift towards more ambitious solutions and more ambitious research, because we need to move towards a more regenerative path, to something that really determines transformations of the entire system. And we are still not in that part of the graph that we should be. I thank you very much with all the other co-authors who contributed to this study. And now, after that strange dynamic, I'm ready for the questions. I hope you got some of the messages, even if we have been interrupted, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was an excellent presentation. It's always a pleasure to have teachers presenting, because they are usually very good communicators. So as Laura said, we have some minutes for the questions from the audience. Otherwise, I will launch my question that I will try to. Oh, we have a question from Elham, please.
Hello, Laura. Thank you for your excellent presentation. Sorry, I can't share my video because of some problem. I had a question. Where is the right and the situation of local communities and indigenous forest people in this innovation? Where are they right? Where are they effect? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Elham. Let's say that in the Mediterranean research forest research that we have explored, these communities are not really much focused, not enough, according to our opinion. The research is mainly related to social innovation processes and dynamics. They have been observed, but not in an extensive way, in the sense that there are relatively few papers focusing on that and looking at the processes of innovation, internal to the communities, and also how these communities are connected to the other actors. There is something about commons, but commons is a very specific type of communities, nature-based communities, they say. All those that are not recognized, institutionally recognized as commons, are not enough explored. And if they are explored, they are just small case studies, not highly visible and not highly cited because of the fact that they are very site-specific. And this is something that in our paper we stress a lot, because one of the directions we suggest is to try to give more visibility to these highly fragmented initiatives. The practices is much more advanced than the research and even of the policymakers' actions. So we should give more visibility to this enormous amount of initiatives. And something is started with SIMRA catalogs and with other projects focusing on that, but not yet enough. So having research on these would help a lot in future, according to our opinion.
And I see that Carmen also has a question. Please, Carmen.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Thanks, Laura, for the presentation. Always very nice. Sorry, I'm not switching on my camera, but my connection is not great. But I hope to see you in person next week. I have a very short question. Why did you decide to divide between social innovation and institutional innovation? And or what was the criteria? Because I see like super difficult in how I usually approach it is that I say that social innovation can emerge from the bottom, but also from like the public administration. What was your logic there?
Thank you, Carmen, for your question. Very appropriate, because this is one of the problems we found in designing and in running the study, and also in trying to wrap up the conclusions and the results. What we were trying to do was to use the previously published definitions of innovations, and institutional innovations is normally considered changes in the policies, for example, example, introduction of policy reforms and policy tools by the public authorities. This is what is intended in the common understanding of this term. So that's why we kept that separated from social innovation. That was in the similar definition more focused on dynamics and changes that are connected with the actions of the civil society. Not always, but in many cases. It is just because we needed to have some kind of analytical framework to classify that. And after having run this study, we found out that we should try to use a more system thinking oriented approach also for looking at the innovations, because in some of the papers we read through, there is a clear link stated by the authors between institutional innovations and social innovation, or institutional innovations and business innovations in terms of technical oriented innovations adopted by the enterprises, for example. So all these categories that we were trying to split because of the need to classify and to describe them in a way that was clear enough for everyone is not what we can observe in the practice, because a change in terms of social innovation can determine or might be determined by institutional innovations and vice versa. There are papers that mention it, that it was proved by their results that changes in the marketing activities, so innovation in the marketing and internal organizational transformations introduced by some industries in timber production and certain type of highly engineered products are determining changes in the institutions, because they are the drivers of reforms of the legal framework, for example. So they are all interconnected. The problem is that we need to find a way to analyze them and then to synthesize them in a more comprehensive way. And this is an effort that we should try to do, and that we try to do in the paper, not limiting us in that very isolated, again, in silos categories. I don't know if I replied to your question, because it was very complex.
It was a bit complex, but you did reply. Thanks.
Thank you to you.
Okay. We will take 3 more questions. That I see there are 3 hands up, and then afterwards we will move to an interactive exercise. So Hiba, please, you are the next one.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to attend some outstanding lecturers from Padova, because I graduated last year from there, so it's always nice to be there. So my first question, that you said that you use the SIMRA definition. So how far the political pressure create interest in social innovation, and how far this leads to unconnected debates or wider debates and theories about innovation? And regarding the rural and forest context, is it clear how to monitor and evaluate the social innovation projects? Because the results of monitoring and evaluation can be of a great value to support policymakers and practitioners as well.
Yes, thank you. Well, I will start from the first question that is related to how much the policy pressure was, or the political pressure was supporting the emergence of this topic. Quite a lot, because the EU-funded programs that were asking and launching calls for running research on this topic came from the emerging discourses on social inclusion. So that was the drivers the visible drivers, let's say, some years ago. And on the basis of that, all the DG Agri and the rural development programs were starting to use these concepts in their policy documents, and there were funds allocated to explore that promising approach, not only in urban areas, but also in rural areas. This was what we did with the SIMRA project, and that came from the attention towards having more inclusive societies, more vibrant rural communities, and putting more attention on the social capital. So there was quite a lot of effects in that sense. Of course, driven by the pressures done by the politicians, the countries, and also by the society in these directions. The only thing that we can observe normally, and this normal is obvious that is like that, is that there is a kind of shift in the time span. So from when these discourses emerge and become dominant to when there are real funded projects, and then there are research results, we need years. It is rare that we are able to act and to work on the dominant topics in a very, very short time, because it takes long to have the process, the procedures implemented, and the project funded, and the projects implemented, and all the rest. So, but by sure, it is very important. And I think that this is what we are now observing with the emergence of the environmental, in general, let's call it environmental crisis, that is, and the shift of the attention. All the emerging dominant discourses now are towards restoration programs, planting billions of trees, and no one is reflecting enough, for example, on the land where we are going to plant that trees. This is something that is behind the dominant discourses that the technical experts have to deal with, but that is not yet enough explored, for example, by the research. So actions is faster than research, and faster than policy. And the other question was about monitoring and evaluation. I think that SIMRA was kind of pioneer in this field, because we built a system to monitor and evaluate social innovation initiatives in rural development areas, and we carry out a test of this monitoring and evaluation set of indicators in about 20 different social innovation initiatives in the not only in Europe, but also in the North African countries. So it was quite well geographically distributed. We know that these framework and indicators have been applied in other cases after the project ended. So that was encouraging, let's say. And thus there are some tools that have been created and tested that can be used for that. The DG Agri and in general the European Commission included our work, our output in their best practices and tools, a set of tools for monitoring and evaluation in rural areas. So we hope that we contributed significantly to cover this gap that was identified some years ago. And we will see how the practitioners will use that. And sorry, the third question was about, you had 3 questions? I don't remember the, 2, okay, so good. Thank you, Hiva. Nice to see you again, by the way.
Thank you, Laura. We now give the micro to Sanjay, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your presentation, Professor. My name is Sanjay, and I'm second year Medford student at UCP Porto. My question is about when we compare different countries within Europe, like Sweden or Finland, with the Mediterranean countries, and we see how advanced they are in the developments of their forest-based bioeconomy, and when we compare it with the countries in within Mediterranean region, what do you think? What are the main innovations or main factors that led to such progressive development in their bioeconomy? And what are the discourses that you see within the political and social arena that is happening and in those countries in comparison to the Mediterranean countries? So these are the two questions that I have. Thank you.
Wow, do I have 1 hour to reply to that? No, I'm joking. I will try to be synthetic, but the question would require a lot of specifications. Let's say that, of course, we observe that the dominant driver countries are the Nordic countries, because in general, our perception, my perception is that in that countries, the forests are considered to have a high economic value. And for this reason, there is a high political attention on forests, on the contribution that they can give to the bioeconomy at national level, and thus they invest a lot of money in improving technologies, in improving their management practices, and in advancing, for example, all the processes for reducing the amount of waste, and apply what is called the cascade approach to try to minimize the wastes and increase the application of the circular economy also together with the bioeconomy principles. So the basic is that forests for them matter a lot. While in the case of the many Mediterranean countries, forests are found to have a very minor role in the economy in general. So we are talking about 0.3% of the GDP at national level in Italy, for example, which is nothing compared to industry, compared to other sectors of the economy. So there is no intention, no interest in investing in forest-based bioeconomy, apart the very traditional approach that is just stating that we have to use more timber for building. There is something connected to the new Bauhaus, let's say, strategy to increase the use of wood as a renewable material, highly engineered products, but simply the Mediterranean countries do not have the technological capacities for producing these type of products, because they have not invested enough in the past decades. So now we cannot change the industrial structure. We cannot invest a million of the capitals, the financial capitals that are needed to now to start this type of production processes are so high that it makes no sense to invest in this direction in this moment. So I think that this is probably the most important driver for this regional diversity. And the second one was, sorry, can you repeat the question, Sanjay?
Yeah, it was about the political discourses and also the social, I mean, because there are social linkages that are very weak within the Mediterranean region, and if you compare it with the Nordic countries, as you said. So what are the things that we can do in order to improve this political and social discourses?
Well, that is also very, very hard to reply, in the sense that the thing that we should do both as researchers and as let's say citizens is to make pressure on the politicians and make them become more aware of the fact that forests are relevant resources, and that we can use them in a much more multifunctional way. They don't know that, simply. So we need to improve our capacity in terms of communication and dissemination, by sure, from one side, and also be more making more pressure on what we think is relevant, being aware that there are sectors that are not forest sectors, but are environmental oriented sectors or environmentalist oriented sectors or other type of, let's say, focus that are much more powerful than us in the capacity to communicate. So, and they have a large audience. So the politicians are listening to their pressures. The shift that we are observing in many of the European Union policies is somehow determined by these emerging environmentalist discourses. And the foresters do not have enough skills to provide another visions or how to balance these interests with more productive interests. So it is a very complex situation, but we are observing a lot of conflicts on that nowadays in Europe, and not only in Europe. The dilemma or the conflict between nature conservation and timber production is again becoming an issue. It was like that some decades, then we entered into the discussion of the multifunctionality, ecosystem services, balancing, such a kind of stuff. But now that we are facing this energy crisis, climate crisis, biodiversity loss crisis, there are emergencies. We have to act now to try to restore our forest and to use them in a different way. Then it depends on who is more dominant. Is about power distribution between politicians and economic interests, basically. So when we will see maybe next week we will see the data about what is expected in terms of consumption of wood for bioenergy production, so for supply energy, there is a large uncertainty about the level of this of the demand. The fork is between minus 17% plus 400% that of the wood that will be used for energy consumption, expected by 2050. And these are, let's say, data that are provided, that are simulated by the FAO. So we don't know what will happen, basically, about the future demands of wood for energy production, wood-based biomasses for energy production. If this will become an issue and will remain a permanent issue, we have to find a way to balance the need to protect biodiversity, protect nature, conserve a whole growth forest, and find a way to produce timber for energy, that's biomasses for energy. I mean, it's a matter of balancing discourses, political interest, citizens' visions, and emergencies at the end.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And now the last question from Elham, and we will pass to the exercise that Magda has prepared for us.
Thank you. In our previous webinar about forest genetics, I see Iran as one of the list of Mediterranean region, but now in your paper, Iran was not in the list. Is there any specific consideration? Thank you.
No, just because it is not in the presentation, but it is mentioned, of course. The forest genetic resources is one of the emerging topics. The point is that so far it has been mainly explored from the technical point of view. So how to produce new forest genetic resources, how to test them with appropriate trials, how to introduce new forest management practices like assisted migration or such a kind of stuff, but not yet explored from the point of view of the social acceptability of this new type of uses. These imply changes in terms of forest owners and forest managers' attitudes and technical skills to adopt these new resources, let's say, and there is nothing published yet on this. And we hope that, by the way, I am right now in a kickoff meeting of a project founded on this topic, that's where EFI is also involved, EFIMED is also involved, and I think that it will become an issue because of the forest restoration programs that are becoming so important. All the pledge on 3 billion trees planting, it will require a lot of investment very quick on understanding how to produce seedling, how to improve breeding, and all these type of technical aspects, but also how the forest owners, land managers, and nurseries, and the value chains are ready or should innovate to be able to supply what is needed.
Thank you very much, Laura. We have now an exercise. In fact, it's a survey to collect your opinions on the challenges and the research questions on the Mediterranean forest research agenda. And this exercise has been prepared on Mentimeter. So maybe some of you are already familiar with this tool. So you have several ways to access it.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, Magda?
We already put in the chat the link for Miro. And before moving, just to tell them that the project that Laura mentioned is here in the resources section, but also on Miro boards, I can access other information, like some interesting paper, and I can see also other participants in this webinar. So this Miro board will be also made available, like the recording, on the website of EFIMED. So now we can go again for this question, and we can can present it, Edward. So we will ask you twice during this session about where are you from. It's because after for the question, we can analyze from which country what results we have without any personal identification, just the country. And so we can make some analysis on this. So you can you have in the chat the link. So you enter and you have the code you can enter here. So menti.com, and then you can enter this code. So these are the research questions, very much inspired from the papers that Laura and her colleague identified. So we formulate them in a simple way. So you can read these questions one by one and tell us how relevant they are for your country. For example, for the first one, what are the barriers for innovation, adoption, and social, technical, or institutional business entrepreneurship in Mediterranean forest? So this is a question that we think is a priority, and we should address it. Welcome back, Edward.
Sorry, my computer crashed without any previous warning. I'm back.
Okay. So people are invited to vote for each of these questions. If they are irrelevant, it's 1. If they are very relevant for them, it's 5. Yeah, for people who are wondering what is PES, it's Payment for Ecosystem Services. Sorry, I didn't put the acronym here. So PES is Payment for Ecosystem Services.
Yep, this is in question number 5.
Yes.
There have been 17 submitted questions until now. We are 30 in the meeting, so we can maybe wait 1 minute for those that need some extra time to answer. 18 now.
Edward, should
Okay.
I also
Yep.
vote?
Ah.
No, because I don't know whether you are taking into account also my
Yeah,
vote or
usually
not.
we never reach the total number of attendees
Okay.
because there are our technical staff also here and communication staff supporting
Okay.
the event. And I think that you have provided your opinion and especially your relevance in the paper, and you will be in the forum next week, right? So 21. I think that if there is anybody needing some extra seconds, open the micro and say, I need some extra seconds. Otherwise, we will jump to the next question. Okay, I think that we can go to the next. So this was the list of research questions for the Mediterranean Forest Research Agenda. Here, we'd like to know your opinion if there is any missing research question, and then in the next slide, you will be allowed to write which is this missing research question. So think about if you could like to expose any research question not listed previously. And if yes, vote yes, and you will be able to present your question in the next. So 17, let's see if we reach 21 as in the previous slide. So maybe 2 more people to vote. So it seems that 1/3 of the attendees think that there is at least one missing research question on the list exposed in the previous slide. So Magda, we can give the floor to those that think that yes, if there is any research question missing, you type on the Mentimeter. So you open the questions and answer, and then you type on ask new question. This kind of form is used to ask questions to the speakers, but in this case we are asking you about research questions that is missing. So you on the phone or on the browser, you type on, when you see question number 4, you type on open Q&A and then ask new question. Or you will see that now there are appearing some of the questions by now one that attendees like you posted. You can vote if you think that this missing research question is irrelevant for you, or you think that it should be added to the list of questions. So you can vote, as we see that we have by now one of these missing research questions that has been posted by someone of you, and 3 other people believe that it's a relevant missing questions. We have a second one that just have entered that we will see now. So on your phone, you can see, or in mentimeter.com, you can see the questions posted. You can order them by chronological order or by the most voted questions, and use the thumbs up icon on the right of the question to vote it. Or, as I said, at the bottom you have the button ask new question to type a new missing research question for the Mediterranean Forest Research Agenda on the theme of implementation and stimulation of the Mediterranean forest-based bioeconomy. So we have 4 questions by now, and 2 of them, one supported by 10 attendees and the other one supported by 7 attendees. A 5th one that has just entered. So I remind you, in the either in your web browser at menti.com or either in your phone, you can scroll up and down all the questions posted. You can wait for a couple of seconds. So I hope that everybody who wanted to express their opinion could do it so. Magda. Yep. Okay, so now while we will stay in plenary, meanwhile, we will be collecting your answers and debating it in this plenary. Or, well, in fact, we will skip the breakout rooms. We are 70 people now, so I think it's a fair number for everybody to share their opinion in plenary. This will also save time on moving into the breakout rooms. So Magda, do you want to expose the results or jump to the next questionnaire?
In fact, the results will be, you were seeing them while live, I mean. And then this result or question results or the statistics we gathered here will be discussed during the forum. So because sometimes some of these questions were already addressed in other webinars by other thematic question. So this is when we will be working behind the scene and will present these during the forum. So now we can discuss maybe the challenges, Edward, and then we can discuss them. People can take the mic and speak, and then we can have this question addressed again through Menti.
Okay. So do we jump to the next questionnaire and we comment it live?
Yes.
Perfect.
So we are expecting to know what are the challenges that people will be encountering in their country while addressing this question. They will be working to answer these questions. Or maybe what we can do is to give you some examples of challenges in Menti, and then we discuss as we go during the vote. What do you think, Edward?
Yes, I think that that could be. We all stay in teams. We access to the new Menti, so at menti.com with a new code, and I think that's a good idea. That as we see the answers from other people, we may get inspired and share our own challenges that we perceive in our countries, and while responding at the same time to the Mentimeter. So again, at menti.com and the code, or just scan the QR code, or go to the link in the chat. And again, the first question is the country, so the country where you work, where you have your forestry experience, because then this will allow us to link the country with the answers that you provide. So menti.com, enter the code 87787823. I'm doing myself also. 9 people. If you need some assistance to enter again. So I remind you, this is a new Mentimeter survey, so with a new code. You can see the code on the top of the screen, 87787823. So we see most of the attendees connecting from Lebanon, Portugal, and Spain. We are now 26 in the discussion, so maybe let's see if we arrive to 20. And we will jump to the next question, as Magda said, which are the main challenges for implementing this theme of the Mediterranean Forest Research Agenda? So the challenges on, and first, sorry, we want to know a little bit more about you. So in which category do you consider? So we see that now today we are mainly researchers and students. We have 2 NGOs representatives, 1 forest manager. That's 2 forest managers. Thank you for being here. Always very relevant to have practitioners' experience on the field, as well people from the NGOs. Okay, and 18 answered. I think that the question about the country, there were also 18 answers. So we go to the next one. So here, how you could, which factors do you think that are those that are challenging the implementation and the stimulation of forest-based bioeconomy in your own country? And you can choose, again, you can slide the cursor from, if you strongly disagree, only 1 point about this factor being a challenge to implement and stimulate forest bioeconomy in your country, up to 5. So strongly agree that this is an important factor for forest bioeconomy in your country. And at the end, you vote. So seems that insufficient funding is the top limiting factor, followed by regulatory framework and the access to networks or partnerships. We'll wait 1 more minute to reach the 18 answers. For those that were not present in the previous webinars, just to let you know that we did the same questionnaire for the previous 3 themes, so we will be able to compare them, the same questions, for example, which are these limiting factors among them. Okay, 19 with the same trend, so insufficient funding as top challenge for the implementation and stimulation of forest bioeconomy in the Mediterranean countries, or at least in your specific country. Access to networks or partnerships with other institutions, and then followed by the regulatory framework. So and here you can specify more precisely which are these challenges, if you want to give more clear details on one of the challenges that you voted previously, or add additional challenges to implement this work, and then we will discuss in plenary. So again, you tap on the open Q&A button, and then you can ask a new question. In that case, it's not a question, it's the challenge we are asking you, or vote for your for the challenges that you think that are also relevant in your country. So by now we have 1 challenge of people that are not fully aware about what social innovation is, and now entering a second one on the lack of cross-sectoral programs and support mechanisms. So in menti.com or in the browser or in your smartphone, you can scroll up and down to see the 3 by now additional challenges posted by the audience, and vote if you think that this challenge applies also to your country. So eight challenge proposed by now, with one having 5 votes and the other one 2 votes.
Edward, Magda,
Yes.
can I then comment back on some of these, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because now we start the period of plenary discussion. So on the challenges. So Laura, if you want to open the discussion, the floor is yours.
Yes, okay, thank you. Well, of course, I agree with many of the additional challenges that have been highlighted by the participants. So I'm very happy to see that we are on the same track, more or less. What I was thinking while reading all these specified challenges is that probably we really need to shift our paradigm also in doing research. We are often focused on problems, challenges, and what is not working. And what transformative science tell us is that we should shift and adopt some more solution-oriented approach, applying, for example, appreciative inquiry and such a kind of instruments that are very frequently used in the science of sustainability. But we should learn how to apply in forest sector also, and in working with the stakeholders and in setting our priorities. I agree that one of the most relevant issues is to find out what are the priorities, what we have to focus on in the coming 3 years or next year. But maybe we have also to shift our thoughts from the problems we have, the challenges, and what is missing, towards what are the potential, what are our dreams, and what are our capacity and what we can do in practice. I see that some of the challenges were somehow suggesting operational actions, let's say. We should reinforce this approach, probably. Try to think and allow also youth that were correctly mentioned to co-create these priorities and create new visions.
I can tell you already, Laura, that during the webinar, during the forum next week, after the presentation of the research agenda and the results of the webinar, the afternoon we will have a collaborative workshops where we will be focusing on action. We will go from action and see if we have the research needed to answer these questions, to address these actions. The science is already here or it needs to be brought in. And this is when the question becomes a priority, but we are going from actions and who are the actors who are involved in doing this action. So this is where we need really not only the researchers, but also the practitioners, the forest owners, and all the stakeholders should come together in order to define these actions and move forward.
I would like to here taking the advantage that we have seen that there are some forest managers and NGO representatives in the audience. If you would like to share your the challenges that you see or foresee in the development of the forest bioeconomy in the Mediterranean, please, I would invite you to take the micro.
You can speak in any language because we have around the table here people speaking Italian, Catalan, French, Arabic. So you can express in whatever language you want and we can translate.
Can I, Edward? And
Yes, Conceição, please.
well, the main challenge is really how to address the needs of the landowners, how to assure how the results that are being achieved can be moved to the practitioners in a way that they can implement it. But that was already identified in the first list of questions that you mentioned, really. But I don't know if it's not a research gap, I think. And it's a problem that we have been identifying in all the projects that we have collaborated, is we get results from the research, but then it's very difficult to turn them into practice. No? But I don't know if the gap is really in the research. Maybe it's a social gap that we have, and we have really to look how to address it.
In fact, for EFI, maybe I can just reply, Laura, before. For EFI, we are not identifying research question just for the sake of research question. The motto of EFI is from knowledge to action. So we are identifying the knowledge gap, if any, and then move to action. So through all these projects you were part of or ongoing now, the highest challenge is to translate this into action. And to be able to do so, we really need all the stakeholders so they can really express about the real needs on the ground and what are the stumbling blocks for this. Laura, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you, Conceição, for this comment. I fully agree with you. Here is where we need institutional innovation and organizational innovation. It is where we have to provide ideas and evidences of the effects of changes in the institutional mechanisms, in the type of supporting tools, because in some cases our perception is that maybe the policymakers would like to support in a different way policy, not only the policy reform, but the landowners, land managers, youth, vulnerable groups, and all the others might have a role in better using Mediterranean forests. But in many cases, they don't know what to do. The point is that we need research, more research on institutional arrangements and how to adjust the current existing legal frameworks, because the policymakers do not have time or skills or capacities to create solutions. They are completely overwhelmed in certain cases by ordinary problems, daily problems, with the reduction of the public expenses, reduction of or dismantling of the public administrations. They do not have resources for thinking about innovation. So maybe this is where we can fill the gap as researchers, try to provide ideas that we already know whether it works or not, at least in some test or some kind of pilot projects and so on, so that they have a direction to follow. They can see how new type of contracts, for example, can be applied if it is feasible with respect to the existing legal framework. And also something that we put in our recommendations is to try to think about a new type of potential beneficiaries of the financial mechanism, for example, because not all the forest owners are professional, recognized and registered in this way. They are not all farmers. The current funding programs are just targeted to those having a special legal status with that. They are already enterprises. But there are a lot of youth that do not have enough capital to start with that, or simply there are informal networks that might be recognized as social innovations, but not having a clear identified organizational structure. And they cannot simply apply for the funds. They cannot get funded because it is not in the target categories. And thus to change this require also science-based evidences of what are the implications of these changes. What might be the new mechanisms, the legally valid tools that public authorities might set for giving an answer to these needs. So this is exactly where we are still missing research. So I think is our responsibility also.
I agree, Laura. And also, I recognize all that difficulties that you mentioned about the landowners that are, well, farmers at full time or not. But that's why we have always also defended that the landowners organizations should be the chain between what is being developed and the landowners, because they exist in the territory, but as they have different strengths in the different countries in Europe, they really haven't been recognized as this potential partner to do this kind of job. Because in Portugal, we have been trying to work that way, giving the associations, linking them with universities, research entities, and taking the needs to them and bringing the knowledge to the producers. And so really we have to work with the policymakers at the European level to engage these landowners organization in a better way.
And I think that here this connects to the AKIS, the agricultural knowledge innovation systems, that we know that in Europe their integration with the actors and their strength is very heterogeneous across the different European countries. So this is something that should be pushed to make AKIS stronger and more integrated where in the countries where it's detected that this is a need. We have maybe 1 minute for another intervention from the audience. 1 p.m. is approaching Barcelona time, so the expected time to close this this webinar, the last one of the series. So for those attending, it's now or next week in the forum. I would not say it's now or never, because you know we are meeting in Barcelona next week. So if you can attend the forum, we will for sure continue the discussion here in Barcelona.
So today is the last day for registration. I just put the link in the chat. So there's still room for some attendees. We will have a poster session also, but poster are already closed. I don't know if we can share. I can share with you the program. So we have the first day. I will share it from here. The program will be updated today afternoon. So just take it now for information. The first day we will have the presentation of the 4 papers and the results of the webinar, and the afternoon you will have the collaborative workshop I told you about concerning the actions needed. And then on Wednesday, we will have a field visit to Montserrat Natural Park, where we will be seeing how the Deputation of Barcelona is dealing with the local landowners and some other initiative in the rural area to encourage people to not abandon their land or to manage them in a good way to avoid forest fire. So all these kind of good practices, but also the challenges they are facing. We will be visiting this on Wednesday. And the last day of the webinar, we will wrap up what we did already on Tuesday during the collaborative workshop, and you will have an interesting presentation on some forest site studies on climate change impacts. So if you would like to register, just follow the link here. Where is it? Event registration. And hope to see you next week in the forum. Laura, thank you again very much. Edward, thank you for facilitating, and all the team and all the participants and the youth task force, of course.
Thank you very much to all of you. Thanks, and see you next week in Barcelona.